disorder.
So when I tell patients they have narcissistic personality disorder, I'm very careful in firstly saying, I know what the word narcissism is. I know what it carries. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you have a difficulty with your self-esteem that you've always had since childhood, and you've needed to develop defense mechanisms to mask that, but it's gotten too far.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk, Man, with the Gents Clinic. 6 South African male medical doctors on a mission to change the way in which we perceive healthcare. Joined with us here today in the studio is a very special guest, a fellow classmate of ours from the best university in Africa, the University of Witwatersrand, class of 2016, and now a qualified psychiatrist, our good friend Ahmed Badat. Let's give him a quick welcome.
Thank you, Suhayl.
Thank you for joining us today, Ahmed. We're going to talk everything current affairs, specifically as it relates to psychiatry, because we love to hear a psychiatrist's opinion. I think the guests are tired of just listening to our opinions, and to get it from someone who has an interesting insight into the way people's minds work, I think is going to be really cool today. So first question before we kick off, are all psychiatrists a bit nutty, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that. I do think people going to psychiatry does certainly attract a certain type of person. But we all nutty to some extent or the other.
I mean, you've probably experienced it more than us.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys remember when we in first year we done psychology, and there was a theory that flamboyant lecturer, I don't know if anyone remembers her name, she was quite flamboyant lecturer, who gave to us and said that whatever speciality you go into, there's some nuttiness about you that puts you into that speciality. So she said like gynaes are probably sexual people, or they've got a history with babies for some reason.
Yeah.
And I can make a case for both. I know a lot of overly sexual gynaes. I know also those who have trauma from baby and they're conservative. And then she also said that surgeons probably have a wish to like kill people.
Yes. Yeah.
And probably anesthesiologists as well. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, so the thing about surgeons, a lot of people say, is that maybe there's a subconscious desire they have there to cut into people, and you try to do it in a way that's socially acceptable and even praised.
Yeah.
And then also some people say, but it's very controversial that, the thing about male gynecologists.
Yes.
And we had one on our podcast. Yeah, interesting.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm trying to actually think, bring it to myself. What drew me, like what subconscious things drew me into ophthalmology? Like,
what do they say about ophthalmologists?
Not anything I can think of.
Why do you like the eyes?
They like a lot of money.
Yeah, I think it's money.
there we go.
Actually.
Knowing
I think it's a
you,
very simple answer for it.
being his friend for the past 15 years.
You see, now I believe you're a consultant psychiatrist. Yeah.
Now
Just
we know you know how
diagnosis.
Straight.
Okay, cool. So yeah, look, normally we often open the episode with like an interesting case of the week, but we got enough interesting news to talk about this week.
Yeah.
And I'm
So
glad
much
we
going on.
have Ahmed here so we can kind of break down a little bit about the psyche behind all of this. I'm sure a lot of people have been watching the news and on social media, all that's been happening in Hollywood, specifically as it relates to P Diddy. Have you guys seen the whole P Diddy saga?
I've been following it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Okay.
And he's been
who
arrested now.
wants to go first? Because I know Brendan
What do you
is...
want to know? Yes, yeah.
Brendan
said something about
is...
freak
I think
offs.
Brendan can start the conversation and we can just chip in. Because Brendan seems to know more than any of us on this whole topic.
I mean, I always loved 90s rap and 90s musicians, and I was his roommate at Riz, and he used to be like, why are you listening to Tupac? Why are you listening to Shankoro? Who is P. Diddy?
Blast Tupac, like,
I mean, look, he's a colored guy. 90s R&B and rap, that's the staple.
And I mean, these guys have interesting stories even from back then.
Yeah.
Not the type that they have now, but just the way they came into the game, the rivalries,
Yes,
the lifestyle they were living.
of course.
And everyone sort of like not really looked up, but you were like, those were the guys, you know, those were the guys of the rap industry. And P Diddy was sort of the maestro. He was the king.
He was the guy. Bad Boy
the founder.
Records.
And I think this is a good place to start, is that he was at the top. You know, he was the top of his rap game. He was a singer. He was a producer. He owned Bad Boys, which Bad Boys was, you know, at the top. They're fighting with the Death Row Records, the East-West saga. And he's probably had this, you know, he was a god. You know, he was at the top. No one could touch him. He could get what he wants. He could get who he wants. And he controlled people. He controlled those who worked under him. But of course, it all looked glamorous and flamboyant. And now it's come out, I mean...
But you know, like his background story. I've read a little bit. I don't know a lot, like how he grew up and like what's
I actually don't know his background.
Because I read something crazy, like he actually went to a good school. Like he went to a decent school. He was, you know, he wasn't like, he didn't come from the hood. Like people think like all these rappers come from like nothing in the ghetto. Like he actually was in a decent school, and he kind of used a lot of his like influence and contacts from being in a private school to catapult himself into his like stardom and creating this massive big brand and record company and producing and stuff. And I think that's also an important part of the story. Is like, so oftentimes people think like you got to come from nothing, then
and
make it to the top, and that's So that I found quite interesting. But what we know about P Diddy before this whole saga was P Diddy was just an amazing producer, and he had his like hands in every single aspect of the music industry and to some extent Hollywood.
Yes.
And now all these stories are coming out of allegations of abuse, sexual harassment,
racketeering,
trafficking, fraud.
Sex trafficking. So I don't know if this is a crime in South Africa, but in America, it's illegal to get someone from one province or state and fly them over for the means of prostitution, or to come and have sex with you and then you pay them. Doesn't that happen in SA Blessers? They fly someone from Cape Town, come to Joburg, 5K.
It happens all the time. It's not. It's not.
Only if it's
but
illegal.
I guess if
Is
it's
sex
done,
work legal in South Africa?
Is that illegal?
I think it is.
don't
Is sex work
think it
legal in
is.
South Africa? I think it is now.
Decriminalized,
I do remember
maybe.
it's decriminalized.
It's
not
not.
legal,
Yeah.
but it's decriminalized.
But what about now flying a baddie from Eastern Cape,
or Limpopo,
a
for
Xhosa
example.
girl? You know, those Xhosa girls are stigmatized
But wait,
against.
how is that illegal? I don't understand. I mean, if you happen to fall in love with someone who stays in another province, and you bring them over, even if it's not love, like, I mean, if you
they say
guys
love.
communicate, you know, the same language, and you kind of get along, and then they come to where you are. How is that?
I think it's that it's not prostitution. They're saying that, no, I'm coming over, I'm flying this girl from Cape Town, and we're coming to have a good time. We're going to have, you know, sex, or what's going to happen for the night. I pay her, or not pay her, I give her money, she enjoys of what we had, then she goes back. So, I mean, baddies in South Africa don't like to be classified as prostitutes, even though they're getting money in exchange for
sexual favors.
Sexual favors, you understand? They don't want to be classed as prostitutes. So I guess, but I think strictly speaking, it's exactly what happened, what P Diddy's accused of, is that
So
he
just
was
to
flying women
pull back
borders.
a bit, Sister Bettina. Oh, actually, Sister Bettina is sick today, so we have Sister Katrina in the
Hi,
building
Sister
covering for her.
Katrina.
So apparently in South Africa, it's illegal for both buying and selling.
Okay.
So the buyer and the seller. But I remember around 2010 when the World Cup was coming, they had to decriminalize it because they realized it's a massive
Market.
it's a massive market and they can't
It's gonna
really-
happen.
It's
Yeah.
going to happen. And I actually remember in 2010 I was in Matric, and during our June holidays was the World Cup. And I'd walk on the beach, and I swear at my age there would be prostitutes I've never seen in my life before. Like,
And you
really,
knew
like
prostitutes
top
at
Compared to
that
the
age.
ones
Yeah.
you saw in your life.
yes, compared to those ones. But I mean, like European prostitutes walking the
Yeah,
beach
yeah.
in Durban,
Yeah,
like coming and
yeah,
literally grabbing guys' hands and saying, "Hey, let's go."
They came from Europe.
from
To the
Europe.
province with the highest number of HIV in the world.
Yes.
KZN. They're dumb.
Hey,
probably
look, you
didn't
gotta
know
risk
that.
it. You gotta risk it to get the biscuit. So, I mean, look, here in South Africa, we are a much more conservative country.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's why we have those types of laws.
Are we really conservative, or we just
Nah.
have a
We're
lot
more
to be dealing
religious.
with
We're far more conservative than in the
in
States.
like Western nations?
Than in the States.
Don't
if
you think we're
comparing
going
that.
towards the left or liberalism?
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure.
I think we have too many problems to be worried about.
Yeah, man.
But as a country,
Certain
we are
things,
still a very conservative, like religious in that sense.
So
And
the way-
so for our laws will dictate what the religious beliefs and that type of thing dictate. So obviously
Yeah.
prostitution is one of those things where it's not easy to pass that bill because the majority of people still have those conservative beliefs. What they actually do in their spare time,
It's
that's a
different.
different story. But what
Yeah.
we actually say to the world is no, we are conservative.
Yes, yes,
that's
yes.
at least what I think.
Have you ever thought like how many tourists who came to South Africa during the 2010 World Cup left HIV positive?
I wonder.
Those are stats that I want to see.
That would be
Those are
crazy
stats
to
I
find
don't
out, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe
Oh,
it's not as
definitely.
crazy as we think it is. Maybe we save country,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
people were condomizing.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I have a quick question for Ahmed, and it's about personality types.
Yes.
Do you think there's certain personalities or personality types that you would predispose someone to sort of being sexually aggressive or sort of being an abuser? Or, I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely. So when we think about or talk about personality as it relates to psychiatry or specifically in psychiatry, it's generally about traits that you have and the way you respond to experiences in life and your ability to adapt to different situations in life, right? And people who've had certain very specific childhood experiences go on to develop certain responses and behaviors. And with sexual aggression, it's usually more often than not people who've experienced severe sexual trauma in their childhood, but also a loss of power in men, sometimes a loss of impotence as they were growing up that, then transgresses and is converted into the exact opposite, where power might have been taken away from you before and now, you exaggerate it in the other
Yeah.
I see.
direction to take
That's
it
interesting.
away from other people.
And in women, what do you see women who have those like sexually aggressive behaviors and those types of things?
So I think with sexual, we need to be specific about what you mean by sexually aggressive
So, okay, if we're
behavior.
talking like sexual abuse, so taking advantage of someone, I think what Nhlanhla was referring to is how it relates to specifically this kind of case. with
Yeah,
P.
Sure,
Diddy.
yeah,
sure.
like,
But
are there
more in a
certain
broader
personality
sense, like sexual abuse, sexual harassment. We often hear stories of men taking advantage of women in the workplace that work underneath them. Or like, for example, in P. Diddy's case, we hear crazy stories of how he's drugged people, put them in vulnerable
Yeah.
positions, and genuinely abused his power in order, for sexual gratification
Yeah.
in some way. But we don't often hear about it happening with women. But we do know that it does happen,
does happen.
right? It surely does happen.
It does. It's there.
And then the question is, what type of personality traits or what do they suffer in traumas in their life?
So, like, this whole thing about sexual aggression and sexually abusing other people, and what it, for me, even when I look at the whole P. Diddy thing, to me, it's all about at the end power and control,
Yeah.
right? And those are the type, when we're thinking about personality types or personality disorders, those type of personality disorders, narcissistic and antisocial, are usually all about gaining power and control through different means. And whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's drugging someone so that you can take control over them, it all boils down to power and control.
Yeah, yeah. So I think obviously for the viewers who are watching and probably have heard some of these psychological buzzwords, because we were talking off camera before this
Yeah.
about how currently on social media and in pop culture now, everyone's talking about like these psychological buzzwords like gaslighting and
Yes.
7 ways to know you're dating a narcissist
yeah.
and all of that. But we know, having studied psychiatry, and you obviously being a specialist in the field, know that there's a specific set of traits
That
and
you
a
have to have.
specific criteria that you use to diagnose someone with actual narcissistic personality disorder versus potentially someone who could have narcissistic traits,
Yes.
but it's not actually a disorder. And I think that's important for us to define at the outset. So, like, let's chat a bit about narcissistic personality disorder versus narcissistic traits, and maybe antisocial personality
just like you
disorder
pointed
versus
out, yeah.
antisocial traits. Because I think a lot of people are probably listening to antisocial and thinking, oh, they just don't like talking to people. When it's something completely different.
Yes. No, these buzzwords are really irritating, especially when people say...
Okay, what are your favorite
Yeah,
buzzwords
a lot.
that you
So I'll
see?
tell you, it's a big pet peeve of mine. So when people say I'm OCD because I like all my stationery in one color, or because I like my apartment to be very neat, that's very irritating to me.
Yeah.
But I understand where it comes from. I'm being a bit of a snob, but
Okay, what's real OCD? So
yeah,
that
I mean,
people...
OCD is extremely distressing.
Yeah.
Someone who has those obsessions that things always need to be in a specific order, that can't leave their house without checking everything.
Yeah.
They end up losing work. They end up losing their job because they'll get onto the road, realize, okay, is my flat locked? Go back. Get to work. And then what? They're not meeting deadlines. Their relationships are suffering. That's awful. That's not your run-of-the-mill type of person who likes
Type A
everything.
personality,
Yeah.
as we
Exactly,
call
who just
it.
wants
You
things
don't
in
just like
order.
things in
Yeah,
order,
yeah.
like structure.
Yeah. So would you then say that person has obsessive compulsive traits and not necessarily
So
like a disorder?
there's obsessive compulsive personality types, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and then OCD, which are two separate things, right? So yes, obsessive compulsive personality is someone that's rigid, perfectionistic, inflexible, and when it becomes a disorder, that's when those traits start affecting the ability to work and to have meaningful relationships, right? Which is different to what OCD, which I described about having specific themes, compulsions, like things need to be a specific order. I need to check if things locked. I'm worried that there's germs all over. I need to compulsively clean. But what I'm saying is that having OCD is extremely distressing. So that's why it's one of the things that irritate me when people use it.
So they
in
could,
layman's terms.
people who have OCD could potentially, it's very distressing. So like even not looking after themselves or not sleeping.
Sure, yes.
Not bathing. Okay, obviously most of them always want to be clean and stuff. But they'll be like bathing 4 times a day or whatever it is. So what about narcissism now? Because narcissism is a big one that people throw around. He's a narcissist. She's a narcissist.
Yeah, so maybe just to take it a step back, if I can talk about what a personality disorder is, just in general.
Yeah, sure.
So a personality disorder is when you have an inflexible pattern of behaviors, right? And they say it's pervasive. So from the time in your early development and carries through different situations. And again, it causes severe dysfunction in your relationships and workplace. So like when I talk to med students and I start off like, what is personality? We all have different aspects of personality. So let's say you like telling dirty jokes, right? That can be something, a part of your humor, that's part of your personality, right? But you are able to switch that off and translate it to different situations. So you know, when I'm at work, that shouldn't be
Yes. Yeah. I don't talk that way.
that shouldn't be done, right? And we all have narcissistic parts to us. You need a degree of narcissism to function as a human.
Yes.
But when it gets to a point where you're at work and your senior superior can't give you feedback without you throwing your toys out the cot and quitting and swearing at everyone because you can't tolerate that attack to your... Then it becomes a disorder. And when you're losing every type of job you have because you can't take feedback, that's a disorder. And when you can't hold down a romantic relationship because you struggle to show empathy, it becomes a pattern and it becomes... So that's what we mean by personality disorders, right?
I see.
And then narcissistic is, again, that pattern of grandiosity and inflated sense of self, being preoccupied with fantasies, of being rich, wealthy, and associated with certain affluent people. But really, all of that becomes so excessive that it is detrimental to who they are.
Don't you feel like, and if you look in the entertainment industry, don't you feel like there are a lot of people with those personality traits that have somehow made it in the world, that may actually have a disorder, but they've somehow made it because through their narcissism, they really believed in themselves. Like I take Kanye for example, right?
Yeah.
There's a documentary on Netflix called Jesus. And in that documentary, it goes through his life and how he had this insane level of confidence where he walked into, I think it was Jay-Z's record label. He walked in there confidently, told the secretary, I want to meet Jay-Z, and said, I want to give him my record personally, and I know that this is the best and that I'm going to get it. And when he talks to the camera, he like says like, I'm going to be rich and I am the best and I'm this and I'm that. And you look at that and you go, either this guy is just excessively confident on another level, or like completely insane.
Yeah.
And somehow through his insanity, he just managed to make it. Like insane brilliance. And sometimes when you look even through history, like for example, Van Gogh, they always talk about him being sort of either schizophrenic or something like he chopped his ear off.
Yeah.
Like these brilliant people sometimes have some sort of psychiatric issue. Do you think that might be
Sure,
true?
but I think to go back to what you were saying, like I said, we all need to have some degree of narcissism, and I think to be a celebrity, you've got to have that, like to put yourself out
extra.
there. You know, that can be functional to an extent. But also, if you think about a surgeon, right? Would you want a surgeon who doesn't believe that they're going to succeed by cutting you open?
Yeah, true.
Right? The narcissism can be functional.
In that case.
In that context.
But then where do you draw the line between like narcissism and let's say confidence or even arrogance? Let's call it that. Like,
Or
is
ego.
there a difference in those definitions?
No, so then you're using narcissism out of the psychiatry context and just
Okay,
to
okay.
describe someone with a big ego.
Yeah.
Okay. So narcissism specifically within the psychiatric context is what you've described.
Yes.
It's a disorder.
So when I tell patients they have narcissistic personality disorder, I'm very careful in firstly saying, I know what the word narcissism is. I know what it carries. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you have a difficulty with your self-esteem that you've always had since childhood, and you've needed to develop defense mechanisms to mask that, but it's gotten too far, right? And when you frame it in, it's a difficulty with your self-esteem, patients can hold on to that a lot
Understand it better. So yeah, I mean,
you mentioned surgeons like as one example, right?
Functional.
And there's, surgeons have one of the highest divorce rates, and they say it's because of their work hours, but it could also be their personalities, right? And yes, you do have to be confident enough to go in and cut someone and think you're going to be able to save them from whatever problem they have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and we've all come across surgeons, you know that they are very full of themselves in general. I'm not saying everyone, but I'm saying a lot of them are extremely like full of themselves or think that they're better than
they
everyone
want you
else.
to call them a certain way, address them a certain way.
When I was in internship, that's how I felt. Like they have this about them, which is like I am confident.
And so I'm not saying that that's not necessarily bad. It's bad for you because you are intern, you're trying to get something from this surgeon and they're like, you're a small boy, don't talk to me. But for years functioning as a surgeon, and it's positive for him.
So would you say that's someone who's a functioning narcissist? What I've basically described.
A high-functioning narcissist.
High-functioning narcissist.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
when
those are not actual diagnoses, but concepts.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So when it comes to celebrities now, you said, Ahmed, that they need to be that way and they put themselves out there, I can just imagine that P Diddy, when he started off, he wasn't this flashy, outspoken, top of the world guy. He had to build up that confidence, that charisma to get himself up there, So would you say that now with all the allegations that have come out, this is something that he found or developed or enjoyed, as time went? Or did he always have these things inside him, that I want 1,000 bottles of baby oil at my parties and drugs and all of that.
No, it's interesting when you're asking about the background of P Diddy, because I actually don't know about that. But like another similar example with R. Kelly,
Yeah.
when you look back, I mean, there were allegations of him being sexually
Yes,
abused. He
yes.
was
As a child,
bullied
yeah.
and, overlooked. And then you can look at that and say, okay, this is how it led to someone, again, developing the need to excessively control and enforce their power against other people.
yeah.
Projection is that not the psychiatric term for it?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Well, that's why you're here to correct me.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you something, Gavin? And don't you think it also has to do with just like accumulation of wealth? And because I mean, just like you've pointed out, R. Kelly, very successful musician, well established, very wealthy. Bill Cosby, look at Hugh Hefner, all these big names. It's like you get to a certain earning bracket where money is not a problem anymore. People tend to, I don't know, they tend to develop, or I don't know if it's a personality disorder, or they tend to just be self-destructive.
So, like, we can't say all people who are wealthy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's about
lot of
what
them.
are they doing with that? And these
Yeah.
people who have the access to these enormous amounts of wealth are using it to enact what I'm saying, these
Yes,
fantasies,
yes.
desires, power, and control, right?
So you're basically saying that, so it's something that's always been there. It's just that now
And
it's
then
being,
now that they've got the
and
money.
then
Sort of-
the other option would be like someone in a low income area, you're like run-of-the-mill rapist who's just enacting power in that way. But these people have, I mean,
Have crazy
the
amounts
wealth,
of money.
the wealth allows them to do it at a different level and
and
scale,
hide it.
yeah.
and hide it.
And hide it
Absolutely.
versus the guy who's been abused his whole life but doesn't have millions and millions in his bank, who can't
Yeah,
hide it,
yeah.
and then just decides one day he's going to break and enacts that sort of sexual violence on someone else.
And then you get a lot of people who earned a lot of money and then feel this excessive guilt about it and take on all these charitable
Oh yes.
things,
Yes,
which
yes,
is which is a different response to having wealth.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
So with the whole P Diddy thing and what the allegations are, of pedophilia and homosexual acts, bisexual acts.
How is
which
that an
he-
allegation?
No, because I mean he hasn't. It's not confirmed. I haven't seen a video of him with bras inside the room.
And I don't think he's
Yeah,
not
Yeah,
convicted
look,
yet.
he's
I
not
haven't seen-
convicted
No,
yet.
no,
He's got enough. There's
no.
enough
So I
allegations
don't
to get
know.
him arrested.
But I mean, if you read Kim
And get a
Porter's book,
conviction.
have you guys, his ex-wife Kim Porter, the one who died of pneumonia?
Yes, yeah.
Why are
Yes, you
guys
told
laughing?
us about this.
So
yes.
the reason why it's funny for me is because, well, it's not really funny, but she's a 47-year-old lady who was a wife to a billionaire, but she dies of pneumonia. Come on, man, that doesn't make sense.
That is bizarre.
But if you look at her book, right? So she had a diary apparently, and now her friend have put this diary together into a book, and there are crazy things that she's saying in there. From when
Look,
she,
one it could just be now that things are hot. They're like, let's make a
A
quick
hit,
buck.
exactly.
Yes,
I mean,
that's-
That
it's like
could
the
be
easiest-
one.
yeah.
Two, if it is real, sure. Tell us what's in
So
it.
let me give you guys a quick synopsis of what's in the book.
Oh.
So she comes from whatever town, I think Georgia, where she grew up, the state, goes up to New York, meets P. Diddy while he's a young guy who's trying to also come up. He falls in love with her, he asks her out, and within the first few months, he's asking her to like put objects in his anus. And then
Okay.
she butt plugs him or whatever, he bleeds, she gets pissed, he enjoys it, and she breaks up with him. A year later, he links up with her again, and eventually he apologizes, says, I hated that. I don't know why I asked you to finger my anus. But
It's okay.
All right, and then
I'm going through this quick. Eventually, she's like, I love this guy. I'm so young. She's writing retrospectively. I loved him. I was so young. I loved the fame. I eventually started enjoying doing this to him. Eventually, she alleges in the book that he would call, Jay-Z, and they would enjoy Jay-Z together. P. Diddy will enjoy Jay-Z, she would enjoy Jay-Z. She would sleep with Tupac, for example, and P. Diddy tried to get Tupac to sleep with the both of them as well. Apparently, Tupac wanted to murder him.
what?
They
Okay,
apparently-
okay, we don't need to go through every celebrity now. So there's a lot of celebrities.
Yeah, or foursome with Will Smith and Jada. Jamie Foxx.
So crazy stuff happens.
Crazy
Unverified.
Right. Well, we get that. There's
So
a lot
this
of
is
sex
all,
happening.
Okay, yes, this is all in the book. But where I'm getting to is that the way she describes it is that when she met him and he was still up and coming, he was into these things, right? So it could be that he sort of had, we don't know his upbringing yet. I'm sure in 50 Cent's documentary, Surviving
I think there's a
Diddy,
documentary they're making. On
yes,
P.
I'm sure
Diddy's
we're going to
life. So,
understand
yeah.
a bit more, when all of this comes out as to what the reasons are, as to why all of this happened. But yeah, man, I'm just thinking of Kim Porter. She speaks there about how she was now involved in these things. She would literally be at a party and sleep with another man, knowing that Diddy approves of this because Diddy's going to come back and say, I hear you enjoyed my wife. Let's enjoy each other now. She was in this life as well. She got to become accustomed to it. And during that time, you could say that she was enjoying this lifestyle.
Yeah. So
of
wait.
being with different people.
So is it possible for someone who doesn't have the trauma, who doesn't follow this textbook, because that's kind of what we're getting to, or what I picked up from what you're saying, that there's usually somehow some childhood or like upbringing issues that kind of get you to that type of personality disorder or personality. Is it possible though for people to
Start
basically like
enjoying it.
certain traits now become
Like inherit or...
Like she
inherent
didn't
Yeah,
or
no,
being
that's-
influenced
as a
by
child.
their
That's a
social
very-
circles?
That's
she
a very
just
good
learned
question.
it and started enjoying it, for example.
And then maybe, or are you kind of asking, did she kind of like take on some of his traits?
Yes.
And start enjoying, potentially abusing others?
Were they abusing?
It was consensual,
Yeah.
but she was like, I don't know this life. It's being introduced. She actually dumped him many times for asking her to be involved in these things. But then he would shower her with gifts and flowers and money and then speak to her. And then all of a sudden she's back to fingering, anal, and all of those things. You understand?
Okay, maybe that might have just been a new sexual experience she was introduced to and started
Yeah.
enjoying it, which is different to him showering her with things and coercing her into something. So it's important to sort of make
Yeah,
that
that
distinction.
distinction.
So it's easy to be...
But I think a more important question around this whole topic is like for somebody who, and we're not saying that necessarily P Diddy has narcissistic personality disorder, but for people with personality disorders, is there an attraction from a specific type of partner? So with their own potential traumas or issues, and so for example, we spoke about narcissistic, and then maybe you can talk a little bit more about what antisocial is and what type of partners do these people attract.
Sure. Yeah. So just to like clarify, antisocial doesn't mean someone who doesn't like socializing. It's not an
Yeah.
introvert. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not an introvert,
We
yeah.
don't mean an introvert. That's asocial, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
antisocial personality disorder is someone who has a pattern of disregards for the rights of other people, breaks societal rules, aggression, manipulative, all those things, right? And there's different degrees of that. And yes, we do see that they do attract certain partners, and those are partners who are vulnerable through their own life experiences of being taken advantage of by other people. And it's interesting how they always seem to find each other in a way.
Really?
So like a layman's thing they say in psychiatry is that antisocial or patients with antisocial personality disorder end up dating patients with borderline personality disorder, which is a personality disorder of vulnerability, of wanting to please someone, of idealizing whoever you're in a relationship with. And that marries so well with someone who can just take advantage of that.
Do you think Thabo Bester and Dr. Mugudumane could be those type of personality disorders?
What did you say?
I'm saying, do
Thabo,
think
you don't have to
Bester-
whisper, Nhlanhla.
No. I thought I was actually loud enough.
So-
because I'm just thinking, I mean, he grew up as that
Yeah,
type
that's
of
actually
person.
interesting because
And,
when you look at him,
and
he's
you see
definitely
this
antisocial.
doctor
If you
who,
look at
was
a lot of the
well-raised
traits that he displays, they're like
He
the
was
whole-
scamming since he was in like grade 8. He was
Even
scamming.
before that, he was stealing
Before,
and things as a child, stealing money from the neighbors. I mean,
Yeah.
he's like a garden variety psychopath. But with Dr. Nandipa, I don't know. I'm always wary about making diagnoses. But there's also a part of her that seemed to like, she was planning crimes. They're taking that whole body
Yes.
out and being able to do that also to me speaks more of an antisocial, or seems more like antisocial type of behavior.
For her
Borderline
as
per
well.
se.
Yeah.
And not really borderline.
Do you think if you watch a lot of crime shows, there's a problem? I fall asleep to crime shows
Me
like
too,
almost
me
daily.
too, me too.
I
And
actually
maybe
wanted to apply to do pathology when I finished family medicine because I was like, and then my wife is like, that's a red flag. You're going to murder us all here in the house.
You want to perfect the art of murder.
But do you think, I mean, now you just admitted that
Yeah.
you, that like me.
I think
do
there
you
was
think
an
there's-
article around earlier about like if people enjoy true crime, it's a red flag. And we enjoy different things for different reasons. But no, there's no evidence that shows if you
Okay.
enjoy true crime, you're a psychopath.
But there are sometimes when I size up and I just think I could get away with this, man.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
No, but then listen.
All right.
Size up.
No,
Imagine
then I-
your patient there.
Then I
next to
just
your
think
doctor and
of
you're being sized
jail.
up.
I just think of jail and I'm like, hell no, I'm not sitting in jail. My Kudamana
Sure.
never went that far. She was like, I don't mind jail. You get caught, it's fine. You
But
know?
I mean, look. So here's something that I actually saw today on social media. Funny, it popped up today when we were talking about this episode this afternoon. But it showed this guy who created a profile on one of these dating sites, right?
Yeah.
And he wanted to genuinely do a social experiment and see whether women would be attracted to someone just based purely on their looks, but have a terrible history. So what he did was he created this profile with this really handsome looking guy, visibly very attractive. But in his bio, he writes there, I was arrested for beating my wife or my partner, but everyone's had a past. Looking to get to know you. And he had, I think it was, they showed and they scrolled through all of his messages. He had 800 matches in 1 week. 800 matches. And they're showing most of his messages. And in his messages, his inbox,
Yeah.
the women were approaching him first. And some of the things he would say to them, he was like, I hope you don't mind if I spank you a bit.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, yeah, I don't mind. And then
like
you
this.
look back at like all of these true crime. If you look at
Yes.
all of these true crime, these guys who are in prison, they're always getting letters from women.
Yes.
Always getting
Yes.
letters from women like, oh, it's just like, I can save him. He's this misguided soul, but
But
I can save
they
him.
like violent men as well.
And
don't know,
what do you think
sometimes
that
they like
is?
the
What do you think
abuse,
that is?
No, I don't think it's the abuse. I think maybe power and authority and
Sure, it's
They also
difficult.
like that you're a man, not what society is trying to soften men these days.
Brendan.
Guys, listen.
You just said that you're gonna murder someone and you could.
Sister
you wouldn't
Bani,
do
what's
it.
our resident nurse's name yet today?
Sister Katrina?
If a woman, like, okay, let's take you're a buff guy, and my wife knows me. I don't stand for crap.
Yeah.
If you're a soft guy and, okay, not soft guy, but like, do you think your wife would still have gone for you? I don't know what she said at your wedding. I know she wouldn't have. Because she said she
What
wants
did
a
she
guy
say?
like you.
What did she say at his
She
wedding?
said she always wanted a muscular guy who's going to be able to stand up for her and protect. Because they like that. When your wife comes to your girlfriend and is like, this guy is talking to me, he was rude to me as well. She enjoys. I mean, I remember my father saying to me, he used to beat guys. And then my mother would be like, hey, don't do that. But then she's smiling when he comes back and he's murta guys. They like aggression in a man, you know? They like that.
I guess it's
Let's
just, you know,
hear from the psychiatrist
No,
before this ridiculous person keeps.
This is a whole, I don't know, there's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah.
That's
I think we
someone
must
likes
get
a partner that- what do we
Sihle
know?
on this show. She'll help us understand. as to-
No, but I don't think it's
What's
liking.
a soft guy when you said Nhlanhla?
Okay, no, that's why I corrected that. Because, I mean,
Because Nhlanhla can't fight, but he's just buff. You know that.
Me?
He doesn't fight, please.
You don't know of my dining hall stories, huh?
this guy, what is this?
So, but
I don't
I think
think-
let's rein it back in here.
Yeah,
We were talking
let's
about
go
like the
back,
type
yes.
of partners, and in this specific context, I'm speaking about women liking men who are abusers and in positions of authority. I know this is by no means a study that was done.
Yes.
It's just one case of one guy who created a profile and said, I think that women care more about looks than a guy's history. And even if he's a criminal or whatever, and we've heard about it in true crime documentaries where women would be attracted. Why do you think that is? Like, why is there some trauma that they're suffering with?
Yeah, like I said, it's usually someone who's experienced lots of trauma themselves and are vulnerable to being taken advantage of and are drawn to that type of person.
I see.
Do you guys
And it
know,
can work both ways also. It doesn't have to be women. It can work both ways.
Yeah.
do
be
you guys know
males, yeah.
Jaguar Wright? She was a singer back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, okay.
She's now speaking a lot about this Diddy thing and outspoken, and she knows things that other people don't know. And I saw an interview with her where she was saying that she's very suspicious of Cassie. Not for the...
Cassie is Diddy's
Diddy's
underage.
ex-girlfriend,
ex-girlfriend,
yes.
yeah. Underage.
By the way, he started dating her when she was 19 and he was 37, that's been happening a lot.
Wait, no.
in Hollywood.
Wasn't she younger than that?
Yeah, because 19.
She was 18, 19 when, but no, the age gap is the problem.
She was legally
Yes,
okay
yes.
to date. Okay,
Yeah.
let's clarify.
He was
that.
37 or 38. So what Jaguar Wright is saying is that, look, and I want us to analyze this from a psychiatric point of view. She was saying that, look, put aside the violence and abuse and all of that. We saw her getting hit in the passage. That's complete. No woman can enjoy that. But she was saying, when it comes to the freak-offs and the baby oil and lots of prostitutes and men, Jaguar Wright was suspicious that to some extent Cassie was enjoying these sex parties and
She's an accomplice.
not really accomplice in the crimes. I'm not sure. We don't know, potentially. But she was involved. Yes, there's allegations that P Diddy would bring men to sleep with her and that was potentially rape. But we don't know. Was she, to an extent, saying, we're having a freak off today, and then like, why this time now again, Diddy? But then still being involved in the freak off. Do you think, Ahmed, that you can reach a point, I think it's like Stockholm syndrome, or I don't know what is it, where you now also, this is wrong, but you just like, you are part of
You're
it.
sort of in love
abuser.
with you
I think
kind of
something we didn't
fall
mention.
in love with your captor, basically.
Yeah, like Kim Porter's children have said the book is not true, right? But she says even there that Diddy, whenever she's pregnant, Diddy would let men run a train on her before she gives birth.
What?
Okay,
this is ridiculous.
I don't know how
This is from
verified.
the book.
I don't know
This
how
is
reliable the book
ridiculous.
is.
Now I don't believe in this.
What's the name of the
but
book?
guys, read just.
Okay, we'll read the book, but
Yes.
from
What's the
what
name
you're
of the-
saying, this
I
sounds
don't know what's it's Kim
absolutely.
Porter's
Kim
diary
Porter's
or
diary.
whatever.
This sounds
yes.
ridiculous.
But just to go back to Cassie,
Yeah.
in this whole allegation indictment, Cassie's a victim, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
When that video was taken of her being beaten and bashed and thrown,
Yeah.
which was horrendous,
Yes. Yes.
before that was her trying to get out of a freak off, right? And him
Yeah.
trying to pull her
Oh,
back in.
that was
Oh, was
potentially
that-
a
is that
freak
what
off
the
that
video
was
was?
happening there.
that was the context of the video. So
Oh,
in that
okay.
hotel room, with
Yeah,
the lobby
yeah.
of that, there was a freak off happening in
Happening.
that room, and she tried to
Okay.
escape from that.
Okay.
So I don't think she, as who?
Jaguar Wright.
Jaguar
Yeah,
Wright.
I mean, I don't think you can say she was.
I think
enjoying
everyone
it
now is going to
or-
jump on and
Yeah.
throw in their own opinions.
do you
I
think
was
about
there at the
this?
time, and
Can you talk about a freak off and what they say happened there? Just
yeah,
because
let's
I-
what
let's
happens in the
clarify
freak-offs?
what was the freak offs, because we
So
hear
the
this
freak
term
offs
being
is-
thrown around.
The freak offs is where they allege that there were male and female prostitutes that Diddy would have on a payroll, bring them in. They would all be made to sleep with Cassie. He would sleep with others. Some would chow him, and he would masturbate watching them doing the freak offs.
So it's an orgy. It's
But
basically
it was
Massive
highly
orgy.
choreographed and specific to how he wanted it.
Yes.
So he direct what must go on, which
Yeah.
is again someone who's liking to control at a very horrendous level. So it would be very staged. They'd have to get all the baby oil, all the linen,
Yes. All the
the-
toys.
the toys, people who'd have to fly in, specific sex workers, and the people who would be coerced into participating in the freak offs were people who he'd promise jobs to or careers to or something like
And-
that, right?
And there was a guy who was arrested in 2018 who started telling the police about these freak offs with Diddy and that he's a male prostitute
Oh,
and
yes,
an ex-porn star. And no one believed him. in 2018, he was arrested for shooting for some gun
Who's this?
crime. Some white guy who was arrested in 2018 for a gun crime. And during his interrogation, they thought that he's cuckoos. He was saying, Diddy has freak offs. I go to them. And
I
you
see.
and no one believed it.
No
Do you
one
think Cassie then could be brainwashed? Because there's a bodyguard, I forget his name, who says Cassie used to come and cry to him a lot about what's going on. He would give Cassie advice on what to do and how to escape. And then Cassie would go back to P. Diddy and tell P. Diddy what the bodyguard just told her to do.
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
It's difficult for victims in abusive relationships to escape that pattern of violence. And that can get perceived as them liking it or being wanting to be an accomplice or part of it, which is not the case. It is really difficult.
Because I
To
mean,
go
a
would
lot
she
of, a
go
lot of
back to
victims
and
of
tell him?
sexual assault will even say that, like, in the moment they freeze up and they don't even know how to respond. And then oftentimes, if it's someone that it's a partner, it could be a family member, it could be all of that. Like, they just don't know how to react or how to leave or who to talk to because of the shame. They feel ashamed of what happened.
But wasn't part of these freak offs so taking substances?
Yes,
So before they even started,
I watched one of the videos
you
by
had to
Jaguar
be
Wright.
under some kind of.
They use
Oh, yeah,
ketamine,
Yes, there's a
GHB,
cocktail. Yeah.
benzodiazepines, and again, that's taking away
Ketamine.
your ability. Yeah, ketamine.
So they had a combo. Apparently, it's a combo drug called Tusi. You can Google this. It's apparently a combo drug with all of what you mentioned. So GHB, benzodiazepine, ketamine, and then also on top of that, cocaine, and the last kicker was sildenafil or Viagra.
Yeah.
To keep you hard and keep you ready to go. So 5 combinations in one drug. The benzodiazepine obviously keeps you a bit. It has a similar effect as alcohol,
Sedative.
Yeah.
but a more sedative
Depressant.
effect than alcohol. Then you've got the cocaine, which is a stimulant. You've got the ketamine, which is a sedative hypnotic, which basically puts you in a almost dissociative state. So you kind of, like, obviously I work in the emergency unit. We give it to patients when we need to, like, reduce fractures. So they kind of, they look like they're aware.
But
in the, in reality, they're not feeling anything that's actually happening to their body at that time. But and a lot of the times patients will hallucinate.
they see things,
they see
dragons,
things,
angels.
So that's what that is for. So to keep you out of this, in this like dissociative state where you're not even in your body. Then there's the GHB, which is similar to benzo.
Yes.
So it's another sedative. And then you finally got the Viagra to keep you going whilst it's all happening.
This could be rape then, man. The thing is, he would say that the consent is them coming to the party. But I would say consent is ongoing. Consent is just not I arrive. Consent should be, can I take this drug? Consent should be, can you put me in this position? Can you do this to me? Can this person now take over from this person? I need to be giving consent continuously. And I can't give consent if I'm high on ketamine and I'm seeing angels and stuff.
So obviously the allegations are that in these freak offs, everybody talks about the baby oil, which, I mean, that's not the biggest part of the case. When the state has to make a case against him, they're going to have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he, one, drugged people and then made them have sex against their consent. Now, if he's already drugged them, then the consent part, whether they got consent or not, has already fallen away because he's involuntarily given someone a substance to take them out of their normal senses. So that's that issue. Yeah. And then the other thing they're going to have to prove, obviously, if they don't prove that, then they've got to prove beyond reasonable doubt that these people, okay, maybe they took the drugs willingly. Now they've got to prove that the consensual, these acts of sex were not consensual. And that's going to be a tough part of the case.
Very difficult. It's going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be
and
the
IV
hardest.
fluids.
Oh,
did you hear about
yes.
that?
Yeah. They were
So
giving them
those
drips.
freak offs used to last for a couple of days. It wasn't just once off. It was like 4 to 5 days. And afterwards, people, including P. Diddy and, well, everyone they'd import IV fluids.
So some doctor was administering.
No, there were lots of people behind it.
Kim Porter speaks about a freak off where Will Smith and this guy, Al B, someone come out of the room, or redacted name, sorry, and Will Smith, and they living in this house, and there's blood coming down the one guy's ass, and the other one has a cum stain on his back. but they're just walking
What?
around the house and chatting casual. Like, so guys, I don't know how much this book is true. I don't know.
I
Promoted
think-
this book.
No, you clearly, yeah.
I think you really enjoyed you enjoyed the
It was
gossip.
shocking.
You
But
enjoyed the
here's-
gossip.
here's-
Read the
here's
book,
a-
I think that was a sensational take. I think maybe some of the stuff that she may have mentioned to the friend, and then the friend
Yeah.
went, "I can make millions here.
Okay, yes.
Let
Yeah.
me just
Apparently
go
it's
and
sold
I
out
ran
now.
a
Need to look
train on
into-
me before." No,
Well, while
come
I'm
on.
9 months.
Yeah.
Nah.
No, that's ridiculous.
And just the
I don't
detail,
know.
it sounds so dramaful.
You know, I was laughing just now when I was asking, I don't understand why Cassie go and tell P. Diddy what the bodyguard advised her. Made me think when we were young, man, when you're dating someone and then some guy who you know he wants your chick. Then he tells your chick crap about you. Then your chick comes to you and tells you, this guy's telling me nonsense about you. Then you're like, baby, man, he's talking nonsense. Then you want to murder, bruh. But yeah, that is it.
Another thing we didn't touch, I know I'm taking us a bit back, but just, for our viewers who've heard about antisocial, narcissistic, and all these things, just to define, personality disorders, the different types of personality disorders, and I think they probably by now know when it's a disorder and not a sort of a
Yeah, so
trait.
the social and
So-
occupational dysfunction side of it.
The categories.
Or
yeah.
just,
I think it's just broad
just a broad
categories.
sort of.
Yeah, I mean,
So would, like, for example, antisocial, narcissistic, is it like a sort of a type?
cluster.
A
Yeah,
cluster.
so you get
Clusters,
three main.
yeah.
You get three main clusters: cluster A, cluster B, cluster C.
Yeah.
So cluster A is more of like people who are odd, eccentric, very paranoid. You
Yes,
get
that's a schizotypal, right?
schizotypal, schizoid, paranoid, those
Yes,
type of
paranoid
personality
personality
disorders.
disorder.
Then you get cluster B, which is histrionic, narcissistic, borderline, antisocial.
Uh-huh.
And then cluster C, which is considered like a very anxious, neurotic type, is your OCP, avoidant, dependent.
Aha. Okay, so I think just quickly, briefly, because I'm sure people now are watching this episode and they're probably psychoanalyzing themselves. They're probably thinking to themselves like, I may be really a OCD,
Yeah.
I may be really.
Yeah.
So maybe just touch just briefly on each one, and if one I think is very interesting to you that you want to elaborate more on, you can maybe. But I think maybe the cluster A is a bit difficult to understand for the average person. And we've touched a bit on the cluster B, but an interesting one in cluster B is histrionic. So tell the people about histrionic.
Yeah, so histrionic, look, it's not very common at all, right?
Yeah.
And nowadays it's being seen more as falling under maybe a borderline personality disorder, but it's described as someone who's very superficial, likes being the center of attention, and that affects their ability to function. But borderline is another very important one, actually the most common of all of them, where there's a difficulty in regulating your emotions. So struggling to cope with intense anger, struggling to cope with intense sadness, and in response to that you self-harm, so cutting, recurrent suicide attempts, fears of being abandoned by your partner all the time. Yeah, so that's borderline personality disorder. And then I said in cluster C, there's OCP, which is like the rigid, inflexible type of person. And then
That's just obsessive compulsive personality.
disorder. Yes. And then, am I going too fast?
No. Keep going. People can rewind.
Yes. And then avoidant, again, not very common or not very commonly seen.
Yeah.
Where there's a pattern of staying away or detaching from conflict to a very, we all avoid things.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like sometimes my wife tells me something, and I'm like, I don't want to have this fight.
Yeah, no, but not,
This fight is not
Marinate
worth it.
but not that.
don't
And then
listen.
It's not
want
that.
to
So
continue
for
it.
those out there, because I know, and the thing is, it's so popular now on social media. Psychiatry has become so popular that everybody thinks they've got a disorder and
A type of
and I
personality
don't
issue.
want someone watching this to go home and go
Yes.
like, oh, I avoid conflict, so now I've got a problem.
So
Yeah.
absolutely no one, like diagnosing any psychiatric condition, like any other medical condition, requires you to be assessed by a professional.
psychiatrist,
Psychiatrist,
Right?
yeah.
So it's the same thing. Like you'll Google symptoms of whatever you're feeling, and you can maybe say, "Oh, is it this? Is it that?" But you need to go see a doctor in order
course,
to
100%.
verify it. So
And
But
don't diagnose
what
yourself
would-
from TikTok.
no,
Yes, of course. But what would you, for example, if you were, if you had a patient who was an avoidant personality disorder, what would they present with?
maybe borderline is a more
Yeah.
practical one to talk about. So maybe if you struggle with anger outbursts, if you have recurrent suicidal thoughts, struggle with breakups very intensely, thoughts of wanting to self-harm, or you have self-harming behavior, that's something to go and seek further assistance.
Yeah.
And how would you differentiate that from someone who's like, major depressive disorder, who's also self-harming?
I wanted to bring this part up because yes, we're speaking about these people, right? And we sort of lightheartedly and jokingly speaking about it, but these are people. You know, Cassie, for example, what's she going throughout all of this? You know, what is she at risk of? You know, and it comes to his question when he's speaking about major depressive disorder, and this is a serious thing. There are probably other women involved in these freak-offs that allegedly happened. Men as well. The men who went through this and were probably penetrated without their consent and on ketamine. Now these things are coming out and it's like, I don't even remember getting penetrated. I remember I was walking funny the next day, but now the FBI is saying this guy penetrated me. You know, these are people's lives, you know, and what could they be going through right now? So that's just following on from Nhlanhla's question, you know.
About the separation between the two.
Yes. And how we gonna, and that we need to be aware that depression exists out there, you know, and it's a real thing. My thing was, I don't know if you finish.
No, I think Ahmed was actually about to distinguish the two.
Yeah, sure. So depression is a distinct episode, right, of a low mood, struggling to sleep, feeling hopeless, feeling worthless, that started a specific time, lasts a specific time, right? But outside of that, there isn't self-harming behavior. There aren't recurrent suicidal attempts, no fears of being abandoned and that sort of thing. Where, like I said, with personality, those traits have been there since adolescence and developing in every aspect of your life. So someone with depression, once the depression is treated, they can have healthy relationships, healthy coping mechanisms.
They find thereafter.
But with someone with a personality disorder
Can be treated.
But
it's not an episode. It's a lifelong
pattern. It's consistent throughout their life. And would you say there's a genetic component to these personality disorders?
Yes, so there are to antisocial, borderline, and now there are recent studies about narcissistic actually coming through as well.
So there's a definite genetic link. So
yes.
So if your parents are narcissistic, you have had if let's say my father had a narcissistic personality disorder, could I be susceptible to that?
So like everything in medicine, multifactorial. So there's a genetic predisposition and then
and the environment.
So not everyone who had a narcissistic parent goes on to develop a specific disorder. We all resilient in different ways. And so it's not a direct causative thing.
So my final, probably wrapping up, you know, in the past few years, especially on social media and in the workplace, we've seen this like boom in people being aware of their mental health or others' mental health in the workplace. But people also saying, I need to look after my mental health. Is there justification for that, do you think, Ahmed, from a professional point of view? And that we should be more sensitive to people when they say, I need to protect my mental health? Because I think it opens up abuse as well of the term. You know, people can get away with things because they're like, my mental health. Now I don't need to present at work because of my mental health. I think I told you guys, the junior doctors who come through now, the junior doctors were saying that they don't want to present this patient in front of us because they're not ready for it. I was like, what? You don't want to tell me about your patient because you feel pressured?
I think just to sort of summarize what Brendan's talking about is, we were speaking about how on social media it's very popular now to have I've got anxiety or I've got OCD or I've got this or
and people
I'm
might
depressed,
have it, but
and genuinely I think they are, but I do feel like we've come to a point in society where mental health, I think, is definitely personally being overdiagnosed. I think personally people aren't actually seeking help for these problems. They're just self-diagnosing, I've got anxiety, I've got depression.
I agree,
When they don't, potentially they don't meet all the criteria, they don't have social and occupational dysfunction, it's not ruining their work environment or their home environment, but they sort of, and I've had many examples, especially, you know, now with the newer generation, not just of doctors, but even people in the workplace, more older colleagues are saying like, this would never fly back when I was, and I mean, there obviously has to be a fine balance between like respecting people's mental health, but also saying, okay, life is tough. You
Yes.
are going to be sad at some point. You are going to be happy at some point. But
Gonna
not
be
every time you're
challenged.
sad
Yeah.
means that you're depressed. And not
depressed.
every time you're under pressure means that you have an anxiety disorder. So I just wanted your
You can
comments.
just
on
Yeah,
that.
wrap
no,
up with
people
that,
are
yeah.
more aware of their mental health these days. And like everything, people will take advantage of different situations. But I'm always going to be an advocate for if you feel like you need help with something, to go out and seek it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But where do you also feel people, let me say psychiatrists, should draw the line? Because like you're saying, I mean, I personally, I'm just going to tell you my opinion. When I rotated in psychiatry, I thought there was so much leeway. Like there's so much, like for example, let's take things like ADHD in kids. I mean, I feel like every child who is playful, who, you know, is easily sort of bored by normal, you know,
Doesn't
basically-
listen.
Yes, doesn't listen, doesn't sort of enjoy what other kids are doing and stuff, and is easily distracted, is just classified as, you know, ADHD and is put on medication and things like that. Do you think there's also just maybe too much leeway? Do you think?
Look, diagnosing things are very strict according to very specific criteria. And when you diagnose a child, it's also important you find out what are things like at home, what are things like at school, and what are things like in different environments. Because that's really how you say when something is really distressing or affecting a child. So yes, someone can have a child that struggles to concentrate, but you want to know, is that also in school? Is that also when they're playing? Is that also when you're having a conversation with them?
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, it is interesting, and we are kind of out of time, but definitely we'd love to have you back, Ahmed. If
I
if
think
you'd
must
like
be
to
our
be back.
resident psychiatrist
Yes,
because
I
a
mean,
lot of
what do you
things.
think, Sister Katrina?
so
We'll have our
much, we're just
resident
hopping
psychiatrist,
around.
Ahmed, to come here.
The thing some of you guys say, it just brings up a lot of anxiety, and I just need to keep
Matthews.
quiet
It's
and look
Matthews and
away. Yeah,
Casey
especially from a specific corner. But I just have to, yeah.
And I tried to bring him back, Shem.
Look, we don't want to affect your
No,
mental
no,
health.
but I'm,
Yeah, we don't affect your mental health.
Mental health by
Ahmed,
being here, but we enjoyed the conversation. We enjoyed your insights,
that's very
and
insightful.
as you said, I think more people should seek help if they genuinely feel. Don't just Google your symptoms and come up with a
Yeah.
diagnosis
Yes,
and then
yes.
use that as a means to, you know, mess up in your relationships or at work. Actually, come and get the help that you need, whether it's a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Yes,
I
yes.
think it's an important step for us as a society to take responsibility for our mental health. And as the case unfolds with P Diddy, we'll probably talk about it a bit more with various different people. But it was interesting to hear a little bit of analysis of the whole situation from a medical perspective.
Yeah.
And finally, I think that's our time for this week. But if you want to catch Ahmed, can we tell them where to find you in a few months or not yet?
no, not watch the space. yeah.
Okay, watch this space. Ahmed, currently we work at the same hospital in government. So if you need help, you're more than welcome to come to Charlotte Johannesburg Academic Hospital. And
You need to be referred.
In psychiatry.
Okay, we're gonna edit that part out.
you can edit that part out.
Yeah.
But you can find us there. If you need help, hey, we're here to help people.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong
I mean,
with
there's a gentleman's clinic available as
There's
well.
also,
Yeah,
don't forget,
yeah.
Jen's Clinic. You can come to us for your mental health issues. We also assist with that, and we can refer you to great psychiatrists like Ahmed. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Let's Talk Man with the Jen's Clinic. My name is Suhayl Essa, signing off.
Nhlanhla Vilakazi,
Dr.
signing off.
Brendan Matthews.
Ahmed,
Dr. Ahmed Badat.
thank you. See you guys next week.